Chess game of the day. Now this game is really amazing because I went down a lot of material and came back for a ridiculous victory here. Alright, I'm playing the white pieces, playing against a pretty good opponent, 14, 20, and I start with queen pawns opening. He responds obviously with pawn to d5. I get into the Rider Gambit, and he accepts. And I make a mistake here. I should have moved my knight over here to c3 before I move my pawn to f3, but because at this point, if he had taken, I had taken, his queen had taken, then my bishop to e3 would not have been as effective because he could have simply come over here, checked me, and that would have completely thrown off my game. But anyway, alright, so I do this. He takes my pawn. I take with my queen, and instead of taking my pawn over here, he makes a mistake. I guess lets me get away with it by playing his knight, which then lets me respond right like this. He then goes pawn to e6, which I see that as him wanting to bring his bishop out to b4 and pinning my knight, so I respond with pawn to a3. He does bring his bishop out, but just not that far because he can't. I bring out my bishop, knowing that he wants to castle over here. I want to then castle on the queen side so that I can attack on the king side. He does castle, I castle, and then he brings out his bishop. Now I make a mistake right here, playing my pawn to g4, because now it sets up for his bishop to skewer my rook. So he brings out his bishop. I come up, and there he makes a nice move with his bishop. Now, I can't take here because if he takes, I'm going to have to take with my rook, and then obviously, losing a rook, that's disadvantageous. Unfortunately, I really don't have a lot of plays because I end up moving my queen and I lose my rook anyway when he moves his knight. So I do that. I take his knight. He takes my rook. At this point, I don't care. I have my game plan. I want to attack on the king side, and rook down or not doesn't really matter. So he starts developing his pieces. At this point, I realize he can take my pawn and check me here. So I don't want to obviously let that happen. So I move up here, brings his queen. Now he's going to be able to do it anyway. I don't care. I'm moving my pieces up. So he plays that. Checks me with his bishop to a3. I only have a couple of moves. I move it back down here a little bit to safety. He really doesn't have a lot of moves. He can't bring his queen obviously down here because it's going to be taken. So he ends up retreating. Now I was thinking about just letting him take and continuing up here, but instead I just took because I wanted to keep the tempo. So after he does that, then I move my pawn up, and I think at that point he probably should have taken my pawn instead of taking my knight, but that was his mistake. He took my knight. I move up. He brings his queen up to check me. I come down here, and at that point I know that his plan is to move his bishop over here to a2, and then bring his queen down here to b2, and then if I move my king up, which is my only option, then bringing his bishop, his rook over here, it's going to give me a lot of trouble over there. So, if he exchanges a couple of pieces, then he's going to be I'm going to be left with a bishop, versus him having a knight, a bishop, a rook. So it's going to be a problem for me. So I know that I have to move quickly. So at this point, I take this pawn and check him. It's very important that I not take the other pawn, because that would not only give his rook the opportunity to come into the action, but also it would open up room for his king. I want his king to be trapped over on the right. He responds by taking my pawn. Now I had a couple options. I could have brought my queen over here, to check him, but I didn't want to do that because that he would have had been able to go back over there, and I would have lost some momentum. So I bring my queen over here, knowing that my next move is going to be over here, checking him, and then moving up and trying to checkmate over here. So he does what I anticipate, and I bring up my bishop, check him, and he moves back. And my next move, I bring my king up because I don't want him to have the tempo of being able to come up here and check me. Because if he did that, I would have to move, and then he would have some more plays over there. But anyway, so he responds with checking me, and I move back. He then brings out his knight, and at this point, I move my pawn to h6, and he really doesn't have a whole lot of play after that. He moves up his pawn, and when I take, he brings his knight over, attacking my queen, but I check his king, and he really doesn't have an option. He has to move his king. He's in double check, which means that when you're in double check, you have to move your king. So he has only two options. He can take my bishop, or he can go over here to h8, and either way, my next move is going to be queen to g7, and that's checkmate. So game over. As you can see, I am down a rook, a knight, and 3 pawns in material. But like they say, it doesn't matter how many pieces you have. All that matters is how many active pieces you have attacking the king.